The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
If you are enjoying the podcast, check out our Patreon for more exclusive content. You can find us at patreon.com/BookTok for BookTok.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy, a literary podcast where we deep dive into the writings of your favorite novels. This winter, we're hosting a book club while we prepare our 10-part literary analysis of Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass. This is Jack.
And I'm Amy. And each week, we'll discuss one book from our winter book club roster. By using our literary background, we'll provide our flash analysis of each book as well as discuss listener thoughts.
This week, we're discussing The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. Warning to part 1 and part 2. I will edit it both. I am at my mother's in Kentucky. I also just got my sideburns waxed. So
the listener needs to know that.
I forgot to tell you because that's why I was running a little bit late. And it's just like she went so high up where I'm like, is this what normal people do? Have I just had like long eyebrows? Not eyebrows, sorry, sideburns. I just had my sideburns waxed. I'm like, it's so, yeah. So I feel like my face is red. I feel like I'm missing sideburns. This is a very confusing place to be.
I am wearing a baseball cap and I did not put makeup on my forehead.
That's what you just skip your forehead?
Well, yeah, because I'm wearing a baseball cap on it.
I know, but I thought for a second I had this like image of you putting on your makeup. Be like, shit, I forgot my forehead. Okay, I guess I'll put on a baseball cap.
Never mind that it takes up like 40% of my face.
No. Your forehead's perfect. Hi, so this is our second to last book club book.
I know. It is crazy how quickly we've gone through these books.
Mm-hmm.
And, you strategically left the longest for last. And I really wish we had gone the other way around.
Nah, I think this was a great idea. Also, it's the day before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. If you're listening to the last week's episode, you're like, wait, didn't you guys just record? Yeah, we did. And here we are back again. And we're recording Book of Azrael on Sunday. So we are pumping these out fast.
Yes, we are.
I am excited to talk about this one.
Oh, okay.
You seem pleasantly surprised.
I am pleasantly surprised. I wasn't quite sure what your thoughts and reactions would be to this book.
I mean, that's why we save them for the podcast.
That's right.
As always, a little bit of context. We listened to it. We did not read it. There is a second one coming out, but it doesn't get published until next year. So we have no insights on where this goes. We know as much as you. And I think it was a refreshingly different type of book than we would normally cover on the podcast.
Okay. Why would you classify it as different?
Should I have this part of my 10 word description?
Whichever you want to go first.
Okay. My 10, I'm like, can I just do both? Have it be all one?
Sure. All in one.
A riveting retelling of Middle Eastern folklore with modern zoom.
What does that mean? What does zoom mean?
Just like a little flair with modern flair.
Zhuzh
with a modern zhuzh.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I'm pretty happy with where I landed on that. Okay.
A fun spin on Arabian Nights, but was missing something.
I'm more impressed with the 10. That was really good. Let us start at the beginning. That this is a modern retelling of Arabian Nights, also known as 1001 Nights.
Yes. And as someone who grew up in love with Aladdin and Jasmine and often role played as Jafar as a child, don't ask me why.
Yes. Do we need to dissect this? Do we need to pause this entire podcast?
No.
Did you choose that?
Yeah, my brother and my friend were Aladdin and Jasmine, and I was Jafar. Don't ask me why.
Do you know what Jafar basically is? The gateway to Snape.
It's so true. It's so true. Wow, explains so much about me.
I know. Okay, we'll get into that later, but wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, you are a fan.
I'm a huge fan, and I was so excited. I don't think I actually read the premise of the book, but I could tell very quickly that it was a retelling of 1001 Arabian Nights with, gender swapping and roles and
Mhm.
whatnot. And there was a lot to love. There was a lot that I loved about the representation of different mythology
Mhm.
compared to other fantasy books that we typically read, which include a lot of Grecian, Roman, Norse mythology. So there is a lot to love, and there is a lot that I do really, really enjoy about The Stardust Thief. There was something about it that did not hold me in its grasp as I read.
I understand that feeling entirely because it honestly wasn't until because we'd listened to it, so therefore I'm referencing hours. It wasn't until the last 2.5 hours that my interest kind of perked up and I
Mm-hmm.
was more like, okay, now I really want to know how this ends and how this goes. I wonder if it would be a different experience reading it versus listening to it
Mm-hmm.
because listening to it, there was so much happening. And I think that kind of like just the description, just the stylistic nature of the writing, it requires your full attention. This
Mm-hmm.
is not a book that I think you could casually power read or let alone power listen to, which is like kind of what we've been doing with the series where it's like, okay, how can I brush my teeth and listen? Can
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
cook and listen? Can I play games and listen? And this is one that it was a lot harder. And I had to really focus to pay attention of what was happening. I personally don't feel like that's a mark of the book. That's just more my attention span. But I also get what you're saying, or like there was just something that what is the thing that that hook, that drive? Like if it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't because of the podcast, would I have even gotten to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm interested.
Right, right. And I think that's a big question, and something that I've read from Goodread reviews is there are a lot of people who DNF this book
Mm,
because there isn't something that really grabs them. Now,
mm-hmm.
that being said, I think now, granted, I have never read 1001 Nights in its entirety. I just haven't. And I don't know if there are extra layers of homage that Chelsea Abdullah is paying to 1001 Nights in the way the story is told that maybe we're not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a lot of sophistication in the way that she's pulling in all the different threads from
Yeah.
1001 Nights. And I think it is entirely possible that there's a layer of complexity and sophistication that I'm missing.
I think we should move forward with that assumption that we're both missing a layer. So, if anyone doesn't know the 1001 Nights, the core of it is there is a king, a sultan, and he's but feels like he's betrayed by his wife. So then he kills her and then proceeds to marry and kill a bunch of virgins. And then finally, one day, he marries one wife and she tells him a different story. And each story is kind of what you're getting from. They're different, like folklores, folk tales, Middle Eastern folklore. And each story and each night, she tells him a different story, but stops, pauses, and then you come back to it. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that people say kind of come from it. People reference Aladdin being part of it, but I think there's like contention of that it was actually added layer by some French dude, which sounds like it would be, you know what I mean? But like there's like a lot of popular stories come from 1001 Nights because of, of just how many stories, like that's kind of like part of it. I do love that there's almost the question of like, well, what if the son of that woman had a story?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would that look like? And I really appreciate that. And to your point, there's a layer I'm not going to know. I wish I did know more. I wish that that was more part of our education that would
Mm-hmm.
be automatically included, because the reason why you and I know as much as we know about other stuff is just because that was included in our schooling. I haven't actively gone and seek that out. Now, I will say though, halfway through the book, or early, I'd say quarter through the way in, I had the same moment of like, what is the thing that's going to get me through this? And I looked up the book, Stardust Thief, and just to see what I could find on it, where I'm like, please, someone help me. And apparently, the author, she says, and she interprets the book as an ode to storytelling, that it is meant to be a celebration of storytelling. And one of the themes itself of the book is storytelling. And I will say that that then changed a little bit for me, my perspective. It gave more grace to the parts that I didn't quite understood what the point was.
I understand what you're saying. And I did actually very much appreciate how this book it honors the craft of storytelling. You've got storytellers telling folklore within the book that is separate from the narrative that they're living, which I thought was fun structurally. And then you learn how those legends have been warped from the truth of the actual events those stories are based on. You get to see how storytelling influences the stories of the characters and how they view their own narrative.
Yep.
And I think in that way, Abdullah has woven a really complex tapestry that I think is really beautiful. I think one of the, not shortcomings, I think one of the layers that maybe didn't work for me personally is that it does feel like there are a lot of stories happening, but a lot of the stories are happening to the characters more than the characters choosing a journey on which they've embarked.
I agree. I can totally see that. It's almost like the story is the main character and the characters are just kind of like dress up for like, you know, like it's almost like the story is its own entity, its own character within itself.
The story is the protagonist.
Exactly. And then all of the protagonists and the characters are just like different clothing that it puts on in order to tell the story. And I agree with that. And I think that's why like I didn't find like it felt like towards the end it became more about the characters than the story.
Yes.
That you did it. You solved it for me. Because I felt something similar where I'm like, what are we doing? What's going on? And I was like really kind of being mad at myself because I'm like, come on, Jack, you got to be interested in books that just because they don't have a romance. Like you're more multifaceted than this. I believe in you.
I believe in you too. I think this book is a lot of setup in a lot of different ways, right? I think we see a budding of a potential romance between Luli and Mazen.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes I was like, maybe it's Mazen and Aisha. I don't know. Either way. it's the romance is not the hook for this story.
No.
What I did really, really enjoy from the beginning is the richness of the world.
Yeah.
I did feel like the world building and the magic were very, very enjoyable. And this is where, as someone who's accustomed to the characters driving the plot, not the plot driving the characters, I wish I had been able to have Luli and Mazen drive the plot for me because I loved this world, but I felt like the world got in the way of the characters.
Yeah, I can see that. Sometimes whenever I'm like beginning a fantasy book, I kind of have to pause it and just say, you know, I really hope I figure this out. Like, I really hope I understand the world eventually. I really hope that this starts to make sense because right now, nothing makes sense. And that's not just with this book. Like that happened with One Dark Window, that happened with Spark of the Everflame. Like there's a moment of panic where I'm like, I don't remember anything that we just said and you just info dumped a lot and I'm hoping to wish that I remember the rest of it. Yeah. And it was the same experience that I had with this book too, where I was like, okay, I really hope I understand what's going on because the world is so rich with the djinn, right? And the descriptions are just really rich too. You know, like I was in it. I was in these markets with Luli and everything going on. To your point, is the author's craft, the author's ability to describe everything, to bring this vivid world. It overshadows very interesting characters, which I would, by the end of it, I definitely wanted more of them.
I completely agree. And I think this comes to a matter of preference.
Yeah.
Right? If the author's desire is to examine and honor the art of storytelling, it makes sense that the characters are not driving the plot.
And she nailed it, if that's the case. Like, she killed it.
She gets an A+ in that department. But if the reader's personal preference is plot driven by characters, where the characters are the main focus, you're not going to get what you want from the first 75% of this book.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I regret nothing with that one. Should we get into some of these characters that we keep, reference, like that we were
Sure.
referencing and everything? I'll read one of our listener thoughts on this, to which of like things that they liked. One of which is love Mazen. He was weak and scared and not at all the ready-made hero. We will see lots of growth. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And this is where it comes back to this idea of gender swapping roles.
Mm-hmm.
If we think of this in terms of Aladdin, because I think that's the easiest for me to think of it at this moment,
Mm-hmm.
Mazen is Jasmine, right?
Yeah.
Mazen is the royal who's been sheltered their whole life,
Yeah.
who doesn't know how to do anything, probably doesn't honestly know the value of the gold in his pocket
Mm-hmm.
because he's been catered to his entire life. And I love that he's such a himbo. Like, I love that he's not capable of saving the day.
No.
He just cares a lot.
I know.
But he'll run away if he has to.
I relate to him so much. Like, I will run so fast. It's like,
Yeah.
you'll be surprised. Like, I thought you said Jack doesn't run. She will. Was she scared? There was one scene where he kills someone and Aisha, like like Mazen kind of has a moment to collect himself and Aisha's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, I've never done that before. And she was like, oh my God, you're so soft. And you know what I think, on one level, it's funny. Like there's kind of like a comedic element to it where for me, it's like he's super endearing.
Mm-hmm.
Take everything that he said or did and make him a woman. Would we view that as weak? I don't think so. I think we would view that as like, hey, I get it. I'd be scared too. But when we have a man who's in there who experiences emotions, who's experiencing fear, these other characters deem him as weak.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really calls into question our expectations of either
men.
gender, right?
Yeah, of either gender. Yeah.
And I think that that's done really subtly and really beautifully. And even Aisha, as one of the thieves, has to sit there and be like, well, I was this way once upon a time too. Like, we're 80% of the way through the book and she's like, oh, okay, I can have empathy for him. Like, she has been ragging on this guy for so long. And I appreciate that A, she does end up having empathy, but B, we take a moment to really appreciate that being scared of something or feeling emotion because you had to kill someone even though your own life was threatened, that's not weakness. That's traumatic.
Yeah, that's called trauma that may we never experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think he was very grounding for a book that is very fantastical and has a lot of, wonderful elements going on. I think he's the thing that just kind of brings us back to what's actually core truth, you know what I mean? Like that humanizing moment. And I think he's not just that for the reader, but for the other characters too. That's what I feel like makes him so endearing, is that eventually he kind of wins over everyone. I think like he, even with Luli at the very end, she was like, well, once I saw you tell your story, like you're just so sweet. Like you're just a little sweetie pie. I knew you couldn't be lying.
Yeah, you're just so innocent. I agree with you though that Mazen, it's ironic to me that the two male figures in this book really save it for me. It's Mazen and Kadir, and we'll get to Kadir in a moment. But I think you nailed it on the head that Mazen is the grounding force in this book because he is most like us.
Yeah.
We are most able to see ourselves in him. And so when we're in his point of view, his emotions are completely rational. His experience is completely rational. And his fears are rational. Ultimately, he is us.
He is us. He is me. Me is him. He's just also like, I mean, I was like, he is me, I am him. He's such a good soul. He is such a, like, he's just like what happens when you get like just a really nice guy. And I don't think that he's necessarily been broken through the whole thing. Like, I know at the very end he's crushed and he's devastated, but like Mazen at the very end still feels very, very Mazen, like I think Luli describes him as still curious at the end, right? Like he's crushed, he's devastated, but there's still this element of curiosity to him. The one part that I was actually surprised is the fact that the Sultan wanted him to be king, or when it was going to crown him as Sultan, because that means this is a world where there is I don't know, like men can have kindness to them too.
One thing I'm just now putting together, the Sultan is obsessed with getting rid of all jinn. And it dawns on me now that he's obsessed with getting rid of all jinn so there's no threat, so that when his kind, soft son takes the throne, there's no threat to him and he can rule in peace. And that's a really actually very beautiful idea, that you don't want your child to be as hardened as you, to suffer as you have, that you want peace for your child. And I think that's actually really beautiful. The idea that someone who has been through wars, who is really kind of an awful person.
He did kill a bunch of wives. He did kill a bunch of women.
A bunch of wives. He kills a bunch of people all the time, that he can value goodness. And for me, at the end of the day, I'm going to assume he saw his wife and his son.
Yeah.
And the best parts of his wife and his son. And he wanted to honor that.
Yeah. I mean, I also feel like there's that. He still thinks that Jin killed his first wife too, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Because the brother Omar, he staged it so that it looked like Jin killed Mazen's mom. So, but like, you know, just adding another layer of his desire to kill and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, he does want to, you know, make things easier for his son. Would my mother do that? I don't know. I think she would if she could.
She'd kill other people so you wouldn't have to? Yeah.
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 Let's transition to Aisha. You know what's funny is like we started at the top being like the characters, we're not getting enough of them. I really enjoy all of these characters because even with her, I really enjoyed her too.
Yeah, here's the thing. I think Abdullah wrote some really riveting characters. I just don't think the characters had the power that we want them to have. And
Agreed.
I'm not talking about like magical power. I'm talking about power in the plot to drive the plot. But yeah, I loved Aisha. I love that she was the female version of a dark and brooding kind of guy who has secrets and has a tortured past and doesn't want to talk about it and is mean to everybody because of it. Like, I think she's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, she and Luli can have a relationship. Like, just,
oh yeah.
I wanted more of her. I think she was very compelling. And never did I feel like she was untrue to the character that she is.
So she's one of the point of views that we get. So we have 3 point of views. So she is still a main character. And each character kind of goes through their own unraveling process when they discover the truth. And then same thing for Aisha. She has her whole world pulled apart at the very end, where she realizes that she's supposed to be hunting for Jinn, but she actually is working for Jinn. And everything she knows is different. And you also have the moment where she has the Shadow Queen.
Yeah, the Queen of Dunes.
When she has the Queen of Dunes enter her body, I thought that was the funniest freaking combo that's ever happened. She's like, I'm in control of her of my body. No, you're not. Like, just very.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. But like, you kind of have this moment of forced sympathy or empathy that she's supposed to have, because now she has the spirit of a Jinn inside her. And what happens when you can hear the pleas of the Jinn that you've killed. And that is such a great moment of what happens when you are forced to have empathy, when you're forced to deal with the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
And I wish we kind of had more of that in this world of like, you know what? Deal with your consequences of your own selfish actions.
Well, and ignorant actions, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because her actions up until this point have been driven by vengeance without understanding the impact or consequences of those actions. So I love this idea, to your point, that this whole novel is about unraveling our main characters, mostly Mazen, Luli, and Aisha, unraveling their understandings of who they are and the things that they believe in. And I'm sorry, I keep going back to, like, as an author, I felt like 60% of the book, there was no progress as characters. There was no real character development.
Yeah.
And then I felt like the unraveling took place in the last 30%.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a gradual descent, which I think I would have liked to see more.
It came out of nowhere.
Yeah. I would have liked Aisha to be tempted to use a Jinn artifact a couple times before the Queen of the Dunes makes the bargain with her.
Yeah.
But I do love this idea that she's driven to desperation, that she's willing to go back on her beliefs and her moral, or at least her moral beliefs, that she shouldn't use a Jinn object. and then basically becoming part Jinn herself.
Yeah, and then is forced to recognize that the only morals that, I mean, quote unquote morals, but the code that she lives by, she's the only one who's been living by that.
Yeah.
Everyone else is like in on the secret but her.
Yeah.
Which is so brutal.
That is brutal.
That was a good surprise, I think, at the end.
Yeah, I do think that was a really good surprise. And what I like about it is that even though Aisha is like the first female thief and she's breaking all these boundaries, you know, for women, she's in a traditionally male role, women in male jobs.
Women in STEM. Or women in stab. Because she stabs people.
Yes, she stabs. Nice.
Okay. That's Amy's tired of my shit. Sorry.
She still gets siloed like a woman.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how strong she is, doesn't matter how good she is at her job. At the end of the day, she is othered by men around her.
That is such a freaking good point. What the hell? No matter what, you could be the best thief in the world and you still can't be respected.
Yep.
I love that point. Yeah. Aisha's, I don't know, she's such a great character. I really hope that we do get more of her. It just, I think the point where we keep talking about like this last 25%, after she gets the Dune Queen and there's some other things that happen, but I just think of this like random moment where they all get trapped in the city without money and they're like, all right, time to make money. And it felt like a montage in the middle of this like book of like, she's like, I'm gonna go steal money because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And then Luli's like, I'm gonna sell things because that's what I do. And then Mazen is like, stories, you know. And I'm like, where are we suddenly getting time for this? Like,
yeah, it definitely felt very cartoonish.
Yeah, but at the same time, like I can appreciate that it's a story within a story, but at the same time, like, kind of came out of nowhere of this like weird movie montage. It felt like, and like if this was a TV series, this would be like one episode of like a quarter of an episode, and that's the one time they got lost in the desert.
It does feel very much like a filler episode, let's say, if we're going to make the TV comparison.
Absolutely. Oh, so here's an interesting comment that we got from a listener.
Okay.
And I think this will be a good transition from Aisha to Luli. It dragged a bit, and at the end, both of the female point of views felt like they had the same personality. That's an interesting comment.
That is an interesting comment. The thing about these two characters, Luli and Aisha, they're both driven kind of by the same thing. Their parents being killed or their families being killed. And so, yeah, if one were not the midnight merchant and the other one not a thief, it would be hard to tell the two apart.
Yeah. There were times when the story, when it would start up and then I was surprised who was talking. And I didn't even put together of like the personalities are similar, but you know what? Yeah. You have Luli, who's at the beginning, this midnight merchant, and I guess this is the perfect transition to Luli, where she does have a fair amount of growth in her own character development. Luli, at the beginning of this book, the midnight merchant, there was a lot of bravado there. There was a lot of her feeling like she knows what she's doing. She's pretty great. And then there are some beats to her, like to her character development. And I'm just kind of like mapping out the beats so that we're, then I'm kind of like, okay, so what am I trying to analyze here? So Midnight Merchant, and then she's forced to help. The next major beat is losing Kadir.
She's the midnight merchant. Then she's forced into this situation with the Sultan where she has to go find this lamp. They go out. She isn't willing to commit to Ahmed. Yeah, Ahmed. And then Kadir sacrifices himself. And
but I think Kadir sacrificing herself is like the main emotional pivot. Because even when she saw Ahmed, it was a reminder of all her choices. And it felt more of like it felt like a moment of, oh, we're getting a glimpse of things that have already happened.
Yeah.
Versus thinking that Kadir, like with Kadir sacrificing himself and thinking that she lost him, that was a true change and shift in her.
Right. And it unravels a bunch of truths she did not know about Kadir, right? Which causes a whole other different set of emotions for her. I thought she was really badass at the beginning.
Yeah.
By the end, I felt like she came across more as a victim of lies of omission. And I don't know that I felt like she had grappled with what it meant for her to be her despite those lies or in spite of the lies of admission. I felt like it dismantled, and maybe rightly so, dismantled the figure we see at the beginning, but I almost felt like she lost personality and purpose by the end because of it.
I think that's a really good point, especially when, for me, the part that I get the most about is where she struggles with the idea that she's only ever had Kadir help her, and she's never truly had help. And, they're at the river and they have this beautiful moment. And I don't want to take away from that. That moment is in fact beautiful. However, I was thrown by this, like, and I'm actually weak and I've only ever used you to help me get through things. And I was like, did I miss it? Did I miss the part where we were kind of building up to her feeling like she never really had anyone? And you could maybe argue that once he was out of the picture and once she didn't have her tools, her coin and her compass, she felt useless. And that's valid.
Yeah.
But it still kind of came out of nowhere of like, this is a true, like, what is this an insecurity that you've always had? And now that it's suddenly, being brought to the forefront. But she just started the book so confident. And so I'm the Midnight Merchant and I'm a badass, that when we get to certain points, I was confused to how we got there.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm confused about how she gets there, right? I mean, between losing all your artifacts that allow you to do things, and then having your ankles destroyed so that you can't even walk or run and having to be carried to safety.
She can walk at that point by the time.
I think for me, it's just this
there is a progression.
True helplessness. Like falling that far and feeling like you're not capable of anything and you never have been, I think makes sense. I think I would have liked to see some resolve. And I felt like we didn't get to the resolve part.
Yeah. I mean, and that comes into the, the fact that this wasn't focused on characters. Like, I can't get in her head as much. And I would like to have gotten more in her head because all of the things can make sense. Like she could walk by the end, right? Yeah. I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, wait, because I forgot, like, oh, you're right. Her ankles did stop.
Yeah. It's when they were escaping the sinking ruins.
Because we're just not in her head as much and we just don't get it. And it felt like those are moments where it feels like character growth and character development is at contrast with the stylistic choice of this book.
Yeah, I completely agree. And maybe at the end of the day, and we don't know the author's intentions fully, right? Maybe that was all intentional.
Yeah.
Maybe the world building, the storytelling was the most important element. And then in the second book, maybe it's all about character development. We don't know. But it would be hard to go back to this world. Like, as beautiful as it is, as much as I like the concept of it, it would be hard to go back to this world if I wasn't guaranteed character development in the second book.
Yeah, we're going to reinstate this over and over. This is about our personal preference. For me personally, characters are what bring me back. I want to know, what are they up to? Like, I care about their story and what they're going through, and will they make it? I wasn't invested in these characters until the very end. And that's when it mattered to me that Omar betrayed Mazen and now Aisha betrayed all of them. And, suddenly everything matters. And then we got a giant bird. And I will say I was confused. I'm like, where did this giant bird come from? I was listening to the book pretty fast at that point because I wanted to finish it before bed. And I'm like, okay, this will be one of those moments where I'm going to be like, okay, this is a me thing. I missed this giant bird. I should have paid attention to that. But I accepted. I'm here. So once we get to that point, actually, where did the giant bird come from? Can you tell me?
I think the giant bird is a djinn. And Kadir had flown in on him and then said, Lily, get on. I'll take care of it here. So she leaves Kadir behind.
Yep. I forgot that Kadir flew in on the giant bird. I can be there. I just need to be there. This is a book that you have to focus on. As I was reading, I'm like, okay, so we're in a smart person book. You got to really focus on this one. Yeah. This feels like something that we would have talked about in college type thing. Like they would have had us read or something. Cause it's just, there's a lot of, you have to focus. You have to pay attention to this one.
I agree. You have to pay attention. I don't know if we would have studied it in college. It felt like it wanted to be a new adult book and it was more of a YA book. And I just, unlike One Dark Window, where I felt compelled to keep reading, like I devoured that thing in one giant gulp. I had to find, it took me forever to listen to it because the art of the storytelling was not enough to convince me to keep reading.
Yeah. I think you and I talk a lot about like we love when authors experiment with the concept of a novel. And I do. I will always celebrate authors who try to do something new.
Yeah.
And even though we still got, the structure of a novel here, there's like, there was nothing new about that. But the fact that it was going towards, a celebration of stories, celebrating the storytelling ability, I will appreciate that that Abdullah did try to do something new, at least new to me. Something that you may not normally read in fiction. I mean, this is definitely a book that's fiction. It's not romantasy. It's not there's a lot of things to it, but it is traditional fiction. But yeah, I have hope of where it would go, but it would have to be a hell of a shift for her to make that second book really tempting.
Yeah.
It would be like, for me, it's kind of saying, good job, you really celebrated everything with storytelling in that first book. In the second book, I really want more of these characters.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think the other difficulty with this book is that for me, they go so many places and do so many things, and I just can't it all feels like gobbledygook in my brain. Like I couldn't.
It's pure gobbledygook. That is.
I can't parse it out.
How is the book so big? Because I can't remember some of the things that happen.
Yeah. I was reading on Goodreads some reactions, and one of the reactions.
Can you read some reviews that we have? And the reason why we're reading on Goodreads is because this is one of those books that I think
not a lot of our readers
listeners, and which is fine. I still would encourage people to try something new. Still pick it up, give it a whirl.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth trying. I definitely would be willing to try to read it. And you actually have a physical copy of this book.
I do. Okay, you got some good read reviews there.
Yeah. So it's definitely a mix. There were a lot of people who really, really appreciated the Arabic representation.
Yes.
And felt like
very important.
Yeah, it really honored their culture and their experience really well. And, using Arabic words throughout the book, I think was also great for representation. And I appreciated it. I don't feel like that detracted from the book at all for me.
It's funny because my ex he's still alive, is Middle Eastern. And I would hang out with him and his family who, different parts of Middle East. And so there were some words like that I would hear, like, inshallah. And I'm like, wait, what? Am I back with them? It was exciting and it was really fun. I was like, wait a minute. I'm back with the gang.
Okay, so from one of the readers on Goodreads, I wish I had more good stuff to say about it, but the book quickly lost its grip on me, mainly because of the length, which dampened the excitement of the plot reveals. The Stardust Thief has unnecessary scenes and monologues inserted in places that demotivated me to continue reading.
And the monologues is just another version of storytelling.
Right. I wasn't bothered by the storytelling, but I do feel like there were a lot of pages and hours for a book I could summarize in 3 sentences.
Yes.
Again, if it's hearkening back to the structure of 101 Nights.
1001?
Sorry, 1001 Nights. If it's hearkening back to the Arabian Nights storytelling, if this is how the Arabian Nights is written, then I can't complain.
Yeah. And for what we know, it is a bunch of, Arabian Nights are a lot of different Middle Eastern folklore. And that is a bunch of different stories put together. And that is what we got, right? Is a lot of different stories, a lot of different things happening put together in a really short amount of time. Sometimes I was wishing that I got more of a scene or a story than other times. But if we are thinking about it, where this is a text that is supposed to be in ode to 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights, if that's what it's doing, and we don't have to be too familiar with it to know that that is a story that has a bunch of different stanzas, different poems and epics, and that is what this book did.
Yeah. So can we talk about Kadir now?
Yes, I would love to talk about Kadir. Amy.
Without being overtly about found family, I really enjoyed the found family relationship that Kadir and Luli have and how they're able to work through their respective hurts to maintain that relationship despite the lies of admission. I loved just how devoted he was to her. Like he had no purpose. And then he's like, well, the compass brought me to you, and then I realized you were my purpose. Like, that is really a really, really beautiful idea. And as someone with daddy issues, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And then with someone who has abandonment issues, I was really stuck on the part where he said, until the compass tells me to leave. So it's really funny that we have different parts, because those were the parts that stressed me out. Where we'd be like, no, I need you to say that you'll never leave me. Because like,
yeah.
you can't be like, oh, until the compass tells me to. Are you saying you'll go tomorrow if it says that it's to go?
Yeah.
It's different parts, different minds, one trauma.
Do you feel any different about that now that you know the soul of Kadir's most important person, Jin, is in the compass? If the compass told him to leave?
No, he shouldn't be. No, there's no need to say that. There's like, don't bring that. Don't be like, and I will be with you. You could just leave it at that. You don't have to say, hey, until my best friend's soul tells me to ditch you. Like,
it could have been his wife. I don't know.
Wife's soul tells me to ditch you. They're dead. They're gone. You know, you could ignore a compass. That's fine. But it's no, that, I mean, but all that, I do love Kadir. I think Kadir is great. I love the protectiveness that he has to Luli. I love the moments where he's willing to let her be mad, but still watch after her and still be there for her. This is the same as Nightmare. Like from last week's One Dark Window, this concept of this like greater being that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, almost kind of raising this girl without raising her. And I think there's something about essentially raising a child, because Luli was a child. He had to raise her, but into a peer. And I wonder what about that resonates with people, because how can you have someone who essentially helped raise you and, you know, like take on a parental role. And Luli even says he's been friend, companion, parent, you know, guardian. But then to go into a role of peer is an interesting one, and one that like I've seen this multiple times in books. Again, One Dark Window, but you never get that like transition of, well, you know, I raised you type thing, or or this like someone where it's like, I'm not your real daughter, and they go straight to peer. And I find that to be, I don't want to say, not that I don't believe it, but an element that I'm always curious about.
I feel like that's probably because it is a very rare relationship to have, especially if you are raised by parents, right? I mean, in your case, Jack, if your mom had chosen to date someone after your father's passing, could that person have helped raise you and become your peer? I don't know. That feels a little strange.
It's almost like, I feel like with both of us, with our moms, where they raised us, but at a certain point became our peer.
Yeah, so true.
And that's kind of where, and that didn't come, that came with plenty of its own tension, right? Yeah. And that's where I think that, I mean, granted, there are actual mothers and these are adopted parents, you know, but I'm wondering, what is it about that as a reader, people kind of are drawn to it? Like this trope, whatever this trope is, you know, like several hundred-year-old beast thing or powerful thing raises little girl. Like, what is it about? But, you know, they become besties in the process. And you don't have daddy issues with them. Like, who's going to teach her about periods? Those are these very big moments, and what's going on? Like, what I don't know. So I've just kind of sitting here thinking in general, like in a storytelling from an author perspective. I'm like, is it that people just really want to have their parents feel respect them? Is that one of those things? Because even though I like it and I enjoy it, I think I get stuck in this because I've had this experience. I went from a child to, okay, I'm having to do a lot of grown up things. You have to, like, I'm now your peer.
Yeah. And yeah, you and I have both had that experience. You know, the more I think about it, the more I wonder if it is a way, and we talk about this in therapy, about healing the child within us. If this hundreds of year old monster beast godlike creatures inside the minds of little girls, taking care of them, raising them.
That sounds so gross.
I know, it does. It does.
Inside the minds of little girls. But you're also not wrong.
I'm not. But I feel like, I wonder if the trope is kind of reenacting what we go through in therapy of us as the elder now speaking to our younger self who still requires healing, and seeing that on the page.
And then to have that parental figure who's not a parental figure respect you? Because that's the other thing. I'm like, maybe there's like a certain amount of like, well, look, this person was raised by this demon creature monster god thing, and like they respect them, they listen to them. Because with Kadir and with Nightmare, there's never a moment of like, I brought you into this world, I'll break you out of it, like not like I raised you, who's the one who got you your first tampon, like honestly there's no tampons in this world, but everything, you get the general idea. And I think for me what makes Kadir special is because he takes on many of the like a bunch of these roles, right? You see him as a protector, you see him as a companion, you see him as a friend, and you see him take on all these roles, and it felt the most natural to him.
And I think what's important is that he is fallible. He is capable of making mistakes. He is capable of causing harm, and not intentionally. But I think that's important too to the human experience, that is easier to attribute to someone who is not your parent, but, someone else in your life. I don't know. And he's easy to love, and a lot of people on Goodreads love him.
I think people just really search for a protective father figure that will never leave them. I think that's kind of what it kind of comes down to, where it's like, here's a protective father figure that even as a peer and as a friend, they're still invested in my safety.
And my success.
I think this world has a lot of daddy issues.
I apparently we all have daddy issues, everybody. What does that say about men?
Right? Oh my God. I saw this TikTok and it was freaking from a different podcast. And it's like, why do we keep putting the faults of men onto women? Why do we say they have daddy issues when the issues is a man? It's a man's issue. We don't have daddy issues. A man had enough issues that chose to inflict it on others.
We have trauma from a man.
But why do we say she's a single mother? No, that's a woman who's being forced to raise a child on their own because of the actions of a man.
Great point.
I know, right? So I'm like, what does it say? Is who causes the trauma? Say with me, the men. Why do I want one?
That's a soul searching you have to do.
Damn it. Damn it. Let's play Slim Pickens as we outro this.
Oh yeah, seriously.
Overall, I'm happy that I read this book because I will always want to try new books, new structures. I will always search for inspiration. I'll always try reading books that are inspired and retellings of other cultures that I am not used to reading. I think that it's really important that we push ourselves to open up our book palettes, right? And try something else out. Now, just because this did not resonate the way that it did, I don't think that has to do with it being a good book, a bad book, any like me relating to the culture, not relating to the culture. I think truly and utterly it's about a stylistic choice that the author made that did not resonate with us. You look at Goodreads review, it resonated with plenty of other people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really, really respect what Abdullah did with the story structure. I really respect how well she portrayed, Arabian folklore and culture. And those things did not take away from the story for me. I really enjoyed those. I'm really glad to see a book like this out in the world. And I want to see more like it. I want to see more cultural representation because that's how we learn as people. It just so happens she wasn't character focused. And I really wanted her to be character focused. And that's okay.
There's something I saw one time when you're talking about fantasy books. You can focus on character, plot, or magic. And you can only choose 2 out of the 3. If you, obviously, like some books strive for all 3, but like, the general gist is like you can really nail 2 out of the 3. And I think she nailed 2 out of the 3. I just like that third one the most. Right. And that's not what we got necessarily.
I will definitely say she's a great writer.
Yeah, I don't think this I don't walk away from this book like we have with other potential books where we're like, is that what we really would have done? I don't really know. Like, I think objectively, she is a talented author. And I applaud her for that completely. So yeah, I'd suggest you guys, even if you're listening to this and you're not sure if you should read it or not, I'd recommend it. I would recommend reading like Kindle physical copy over audiobook, but then maybe audiobook is your jam. I don't know. I would still give it a whirl. Amy's nodding her head.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll discuss The Book of Azrael by Amber Nicole.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. If you'd like to submit your take on any of the books we've discussed this winter, please be sure to follow us on Instagram, where we ask for listener submissions.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. The best way you can support the show, though, is by following us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at the handle BookTok for Book Talk, and liking, sharing, posting on your own socials would be fantastic.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, did you hear that crack?
No.
That was a good crack. I wish
But
you
now
could
I
hear
want
it.
to.
It was so...